Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and welcome back to my channel Stubbornly Bookish. Today I'm going to be doing my May wrap up, and I had a pretty decent reading month in May. Although I'm not entirely 100% pleased with the quantity, I only read 5 books. In terms of quality, I rated all these books, I think, like above at least a 3.5. I don't plan to spend too long on them because most of these books I want to do some sort of review for, but other than that, let's just get started. So the first book I read in May was The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. Now, before going into it, I only knew the fact that it was a dystopian and it's quite an older YA release. The Knife of Never Letting Go is about a boy named Todd, and he lives in this world in which everyone can hear everyone's thoughts. They're crazy loud and abrasive and in your face. And our book gets started when he discovers this little pocket of quiet where he can't hear the thoughts of anyone, and basically his world turns upside down. I thought the world building was really well done because so many of the world's secrets are kept really tight and close to the chest, so it developed a great element of intrigue, and I was constantly reading and just needing to know why the society is the way it is and why it's so twisted and messed up, and that was a great job on Ness's part. I loved the characters, both our two main characters and the friendship that develops, and to me it really seemed as if Patrick Ness was trying to debunk and discuss toxic masculinity, and I really liked what he had to say. The one biggest complaint I had was the pacing. I found that this was so action-packed and so like balls to the wall that it never really gave you time to breathe. It is not an easy book to read, and with the pacing and the kids going through so much like hardship, I think it really needed a few moments of just breathers and relaxing because it's incredibly difficult and hard to stomach sometimes. I will give a trigger warning for violence and animal cruelty, so if either of those things bother you, I suggest staying away from this. I gave The Knife of Never Letting Go 4.25 of 5 stars. I'm excited for the sequel, and I plan on doing a full review for this one later. The next book I read was Gathering Darkness by Morgan Rhodes. This is the third book in the Falling Kingdom series, and Falling Kingdoms is quite a standard YA fantasy, has a few feuding kingdoms, but has larger pressing concerns of magic dying and eventually possibly destroying the world. It's quite a standard plot and world. However, the characters, in my opinion, are what makes this series so great. I have such a fun time between them and their dynamics and their bantering back and forth. They're incredibly vivid. I quite like the steady expansion of the world. The plot is kind of generic, but still fun, enjoyable, and fast-paced. Very compulsively readable, I would say this series is. The biggest downfall, though, for me is the writing. I don't think it's particularly well done. It's quite basic. If you like medieval sort of fantasy, that kind of settings, I think you will have a fun time with this series. I plan on doing a combined review of the first 3 books, so keep on the lookout for that. I'm crazy excited to read the next book, but I told myself I can't do it until I get my review up. I also gave it 4 of 5 stars. The next book I read was Dumplin by Julie Murphy. Dumplin is about 16-year-old Willow Dean, who is basically living a normal-ish teenage life. She goes to work, she's kind of struggling with her best friend, but she also is grieving the loss of her aunt, who is also quite a parental figure to her. She then does decide to enter into this pageant that her mom runs, just kind of like to stick it to the man, but that's not really what this book is about, and that's kind of what I love so much about it. I really thought that this book was going to just be about the pageant and her pageant life. It really wasn't. It was her learning what it's like to sort of lose friends and grow up and to miss someone so very intensely. I found Willow Dean to be an incredibly realistic teenage girl. She says and thinks some pretty shitty stuff at some points. She's quite human and makes mistakes a lot, but she does, I think, learn from a lot of her mistakes, and she grows up. She has a really good, nice arc, in my opinion. I also forgot to mention that this has Own Voice's fat representation. That is quite a big plot point, is body positivity and learning to love your body the way it is now. I really liked what Julie Murphy had to say, and I just love seeing more fat rep on the page. I did find the love interest to be a little bit iffy. Wasn't quite a fan of him, but I had a fun time. This book seemed incredibly cinematic, or maybe that's just because I know that the movie's coming up. The next book I read on audio, but it was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. If you didn't know, if you're new to my channel, Strange the Dreamer was my favorite book of last year, and I have been wanting to do a spoilery discussion video from it ever since I read it the last time. However, I didn't take great notes the first time I read it. I was too enveloped in the story, so what better way to take notes other than rereading it? I loved it to pieces again. I have taken great notes this time, so I just have to kind of compile them in all my thoughts. This was my favorite book of last year. 5 of 5 stars, obviously. I did have a really great time with the audiobook. The narrator had a really deep, strong, commanding voice, and he kind of sounded like Peter Dinklage. I love this book so much. 5 of 5 stars. Pick it up. If you like high fantasy, I think you'll like it. And the last book I read took me all of May to read, but it was All Out, edited by Sandra Mitchell. This is an anthology about queer teens all throughout the ages. First of all, I loved the scope of these stories. I like that it went from like 1500s all the way up till 1999. I loved the combination of both hard-hitting and light and fluffy stories. My personal favorites were the ones done by Anne Marie McLemore, Elliot Wake. I liked Sean David Hutchinson's, and also really liked Tessa Gratton's. I think this is probably the best anthology I've ever read. I couldn't find out whether or not the representation in here was all Own Voices, but I'd like to hope that an anthology about queer teens is told by queer authors. I highly recommend you pick this one up, especially this month, seeing as it's Pride, but I had a really great time with it. I just wish it didn't take me so long to read, but I think that's more on me rather than the book itself. I also gave All Out 4 of 5 stars. I wasn't kidding. This month has been a great reading month. I don't think ever in my history of being on BookTube I have had such a positively reviewed month of reading. Even though it was only 5 books, I am very happy to have enjoyed all of the books that I have been reading. So let me know down below what your favorite book in May was. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!